In today's video, we'll automate the CloudWatch agent setup on Amazon EC2 using a user data script. You no longer have to log in and manually configure the CloudWatch agent. The moment a new EC2 instance starts, it will already have the agent set up and start sending the metrics right away. Hi, I'm Rahul and welcome back. I talk about .NET, Cloud, and DevOps, and this video is part of my Amazon EC2 series, and thanks to AWS for sponsoring it. If you have been following along this series, we already have a AWS CDK that sets up our entire pipeline. We have an auto-scaling group which has multiple instances in it to which we deploy our .NET application using AWS Code Deploy. Now, in a previous video, we saw how to manually set up the CloudWatch agent to get additional metrics on our EC2 instances. Now, this involved navigating to the AWS Console and installing the agent manually. However, if a new instance is added to the auto-scaling group, or if an instance is recycled and a new instance is created, in all these cases, the CloudWatch agent needs to be manually set up again. It's highly likely to miss this, and it's also not a very scalable approach. User data solves that. It's a script that runs when the EC2 instance starts up. So you can run any commands that you want on the machine before it completely starts up. So this is a perfect candidate for us to set up a CloudWatch agent. So let's switch over to Visual Studio Code that has our CDK code that's already setting up our instances and the auto-scaling group. So we have the AWS EC2 stack where we have all the code. Now, in a previous video, to manually set up the CloudWatch agent, we had added these policies, which gives us permissions for the CloudWatch agent to talk back and also to be installed from the AWS console. Now, if I switch over to my AWS console, I have auto-scaling group, which is created, which has two instances inside here. So now if I go into instance management, you can see two instances. Now, I recycled both the instances, because of which it does not have the CloudWatch extra metrics that we added in the last video. So if we go back to the monitoring tab, you can see this is the basic out-of-the-box metrics. So let's see how we can set up the CloudWatch agent without having to manually configure the agent using this console. Now, I have already added the code so that you don't have to sit here and watch me type it out. So let me switch to that specific commit and we will walk through it. So let's switch over to the main. So you can see there is a new commit that I've added, which is installing the CWAgent in the user data script. So let's go through the changes. So here we have the CloudWatch config, which we will come to a moment later. So we have that as a JSON file inside here in the CDK script. We're setting up the user data. Now, since we are running a Linux machine, I'm using for Linux, and it's setting up some commands. What's interesting to us is installing the CloudWatch agent. So I'm first updating the yum and then installing the CloudWatch agent. Now, yum is the package manager that is used to install on the Linux machines. Once I have the agent set up, I'm making sure that the directory exists where I'm going to copy this config file, and then I'm going to write out this configuration file. So you can see here we have creating a new file on this exact same path, and this creates the full file, which is the Amazon CloudWatch agent.json. And I output the config file into here. So this is the variable where we had the configuration. Now, once that is written out onto the file, I'm setting up the CloudWatch agent by passing in the CloudWatch agent and starting it. Now, once we have the file created, I'm verifying that the file was created and outputting the relevant logs. And in here, I'm also starting the agent. So you can see here, I'm using the CloudWatch agent, passing in the parameters to start it using the configuration file. So this is the configuration file that we just wrote above into the EC2 machine, which is Amazon CloudWatch agent.json file. Now, once that is set up, we can start the service. So it's using the system control and it's enabling the CloudWatch agent and then starting the agent. Now, that's all that is required. And this is part of the user data script, which is getting attached to our launch template. So when we create the new instances, this is baked into the launch template, which means the instance will follow the script and start installing this on startup. and it'll also have these configurations which we have created here. Now in this case, I'm specifying that it belongs to the namespace CWAgent, and I'm also specifying the metrics that I want to collect. Now you can generate the configuration based on the requirements that you want. For now, I have just specified the mem to be used percentage, available percentage, and some attributes of CPU, disk, and process. Now with this new code in our EC2 stack, let's switch over to our console and deploy this new template. So let's use CDK deploy, which is going to create a new launch template because that's the only thing that we have changed. So this has successfully run and created the new launch template. So if I switch back to our AWS console, you can see here we have the version 1 of the template for both these instances. Now this deploy did not recycle the instances, which means this is still having the older version. So if I navigate into the launch template configuration, you can see this will have one more version in here. So you can see all the versions in the tab here. The second version is going to have the user data script as part of the launch template. So let's go back to our auto scaling group and let's kill off one of these instances. So in this case, let's use the instance state and say terminate delete instance. Now let's delete this instance, which means in a moment, the auto scaling group will automatically create a new instance. So let's wait for that to happen. The auto scaling group has automatically detected that these versions have been removed and it has created a new instance. So you can see here we have one version 1 and we have two version 2 inside this. So you can see one of these is again getting terminated. So it has automatically created 3 and now it's taking out one of them. So it will eventually balance this out. So if we go to one of these that's created with the version 2 flag, let's navigate to that and we can see the instance details of this. So let's go to the actions and you can go to monitor and troubleshoot and see get system log if you want to see the log of the CloudWatch agent being set up. So here, if you scroll up, you can see our commands getting created. So you can see the yum update -y, and you can also see the yum install command. Now, this is also setting up the entire CloudWatch agent configuration, etc. So this is still starting up, which means those scripts are being run. Now, there's definitely a moment that this will take to install and set it up once the instance starts. So this is increasing the overall instance startup time to install and start your applications. So you can see everything is set up and the CloudWatch agent system service is also started up. So now if we go back into this instance and let's refresh this in the monitoring tab, you will start to see the additional properties as soon as that starts coming. So let's go and make some requests to our API. So here is the API URL with our load balancer. So let's hit that, which means this will make requests to the EC2 instance. Now, after a minute, once the CloudWatch agent starts putting in all the details into the monitoring dashboard, this will start showing up here. So let's refresh this, and if we scroll down, you can see the additional properties are now showing up. So we have the disk use percentage, the disk free, mem percentage, process running, etc. Now these will show the data as soon as they have the data being populated through when we make our application calls. This will take a moment like we saw in the last video. Now while that's happening, let's come back to the other instance. So let's navigate to the version 1 instance, which is not being terminating and in service. So that ends with CAD3. So let's navigate to that. And the one that we've already installed is B4B. Now, if we navigate to the version 1 instance, you can still see this doesn't have the metrics in there. So we'll have to roll this as well so that this gets the metrics. So let's go to the instance state again and terminate and delete this instance. So this instance will also be recycled by EC2 auto scaling group and it will soon create a new one. Now, if you also go in and add a new instance, so let's say the desired capacity is currently 2. So let's make this as 3, which means it is also going to add a new instance to serve the traffic. Now, all of this is going to create the new instances, which will now all be on the latest template. So all of them will have the script being created. So you can see the version 2 one has come up and the version 1 will soon get discontinued and it will also be recreating a new instance for that. Now, if we go into the instance details that already has the metrics set up, So let's go into the actions and go to instance settings and let's choose edit user data. So here you can see the user data script that we have created, which is setting up the Amazon CloudWatch agent, setting up the configuration in here, and also starting and enabling the CloudWatch agent. So this is the script that is currently being used. This script is available here in plain text, which means you should not be putting any sensitive information or configuration keys inside this script. So let's navigate back to our auto scaling group, and here we are having the version 1 also as detected as unhealthy, which means it will have soon the version 2 metrics as well. So let's go to the new created servers, which is here, and this will also have the monitoring automatically set up. So let's wait for all of them to be coming up to version 2, and we'll verify that all of them have the monitoring set up. So meanwhile, while that happens, let's also make sure we are generating some traffic on our API so that there is enough information in the dashboards when they come up. So now the auto scaling group has brought up 3 instances into servers, which is all on version 2, and it's terminating the last version 1 instance. So let's navigate into each of these instances and make sure they have CloudWatch agent metrics being set up. So if we navigate into the monitoring for each of these, you can see this one has the disk-free process running, etc. And if we navigate to the other one and into the monitoring, you can see that one also has all those properties being set up. And here we also have the metrics on this final instance show up. Now, when we created the configuration file that we used in our CDK script in here, we had these properties already set up. Now, if you're not sure on what properties to be using, you can use the console to generate this as well. So if we navigate back into our console, let's use the same configure CloudWatch agent button that we used to manually set up the configuration last time. Let's go to the last step in here. So let's go to next, because all of these is set up. It is going to the last step. So you can choose all the properties that is required for you, and then you can see the configuration details where you will have the JSON automatically created. So you can copy and use this configuration inside your code. So you can set this up based on all the properties that you require, and it will update the configuration similarly. So you can see all these properties are now being written out. You can also refer to the documentation, which also has all these details. I'll put a link to the doc in the descriptions below. Now, configuring using the user data has also its own downsides. Now, as you have seen, you have to explicitly configure this in your user data, which means it is not standardized. There are instances where you can miss when you're creating an EC2 instance or a large template that you did not specify this configuration. And also in this specific example, I had baked in the configuration into the source code, which means if you want to update this, you also have to update the source code and redeploy this template and recycle your instances. This is a bit of a hassle, so there are better mechanisms to do this, which we will cover in future videos. However, some of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're using the EC2 instances and the problems is that there are increased risk that users won't install the agent at all. The installation script needs to be OS specific, so we saw we had to set it up for Linux, and you need to make sure that you're regularly updating the CloudWatch agent when new versions are available. Because in this case, I'm using yum install CloudWatch agent, which is just going to grab the latest version at that point, and it is going to create when the new instance is generated. So you can recycle the instance for the CloudWatch agent to be updated, or you can manually run scripts to again update that. And we also saw that CloudWatch configurations can soon be out of sync, and it might not be standardized if you have multiple EC2 instances and scaling group being created. So in a future video, we will see how to use SSM Manager to manage this and make it more seamless. If you want to be notified when that video comes out, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. It also helps me to grow this YouTube channel. If you like this video, please make sure to hit the like button. Thank you, and see you soon in the next video.